Unit 1, Topic E, Create and Access Database. There are a number of different ways to create and access database. The easiest way to create a new database is to go to the File menu, click on New, and then decide whether we are going to use a blank database or whether we are going to use a template. So the first decision to make is, are we starting the process from scratch or are we using a template? When we use a template, for instance the Northwind sample database, you click on the template, click on the Create button at the bottom, and the template is then created in Access, and all the different structures and objects in the database are created for you without you having to do a lot of work. I am simply enabling the content and skipping the login for Northwind to show you that on the navigation pane, if we use a template like this, it is already populated with a whole lot of different database objects. If I go to the object type, I can see tables, queries, forms, reports, macros and modules, and all of them have been created for you. I'm closing this and showing us a different way of doing this. Going to the File menu, clicking on Close, and starting again from scratch. The second way to do this, let me go File, New, and use not a Northwind sample but one of the other templates like an contacts database as an example. This is another one of the templates that have been pre-populated with Access, and if I click Create, it is downloading the template and again creating all of the different structures and objects inside of the database so that I don't need to do that. Here we have a typical contact management database. I'm going to enable the content so that we can look at it very briefly. Here is a dashboard that welcomes us to the database and provides us with a lot of information, which I'm going to skip now. I'm going to close the dashboard, and going back into the database window itself, we can see that all the different objects have been pre-created. Everything that we need to do a contact list is already in here. There are tables for contacts and tables for settings. There's a query. There are different forms like a contact detail form, and there are also different reports like a phone book report. Here is the phone book report. So one way to create an Access database is to simply decide what it is that you want to store and go and search for a template that already has the structure and the type of database that you require. This is typically the easy way around it, and if you can find a template that more or less does what you want to do and captures and manipulates the data that you want to, then this is the easiest way to use Access. Once you open up a database, let's open nutrition tracking as an example. It is quite possible to customize and change the database in any way you like. So there is no restriction on what you can do. All of the different objects here are fully customizable. So once you start with a template, it's quite possible to take any table or query or form or report and change it to suit your particular purpose. More about that later. Let's get back to creating databases. We've now discussed using the standard templates. I'm going to close the template that we've opened. The second way to create a database is to start from scratch. And if we go to the file menu, our backstage view, here, when we look at the new, we can see first of all the blank database and the templates. Now if we choose the blank database, and I'm clicking on it now, the first thing we need to do is to make sure that we give it a name, and you'll see that the file extension is ACCDB, which basically stands for Access Database. Okay, resuming, you don't need to change any of that, but when we name a database, you can give it any name you like. Let's call it Sample, or Sample 1 maybe. And once you've given it a name, decided where to store it, if you click on the little button there that browses the file location, you can go choose any particular file location that you want to store the database in. I'm cancelling now because we're going to use the default one. And the moment that you click on the create button, a brand new open native blank database is created. Now a blank database could be formidable because for most novice users we don't know where to start and what to do next. So I suggest that before you create a new blank database, that you go and play around with the templates and also with the Northwind 2007 sample database, so as to familiarize yourself with what the database could look like, what it could do, and then from there to move on to the creating of a new blank database. Just briefly about the process of creating a blank new database. It is important to understand that Access allows you to do just about anything, and if you don't have a clear idea and some sort of a schema from which you're working, you could very well end up not understanding where to start, what the first thing is to do, and how to go about doing it. So the best way to create a new database is actually to close Access and find yourself a whiteboard or a large piece of paper and simply start drawing some pictures of what it is that you actually want to achieve. As we progress to the different topics and in the different levels of complexity, we'll get more exercise in actually creating the design of a database. But the point now is that it's very difficult, if not impossible, to create an Access database on screen if you have not done the design of the database correctly. The things that we typically want to see in the design before we transfer the design onto Access itself are things like what would the different tables look like, what are the relationship between the different data entities in the tables, where are the data going to come from, how would you present the data in different reports, what are the different questions or queries that you would like to use in the database, and what are the different, now I've mentioned reports, let's just revert. And lastly, how are you going to store the data? Where are you going to place your file location? Are you going to share it with other people? Those are important considerations from a design perspective. More about that later. To summarize then, there are two ways of creating a new Access database. The one is using all of the different templates here, and the second one is starting from scratch using a blank database. End of topic E.